I'm writing to ask you to come and talk with me about Theodore. His teachers and I are concerned about his behaviour on the playground. Theodore can be very aggressive in his relationships with other children. Theo is a very talented student who can produce some excellent design ideas when he applies himself. However, his progress is sometimes hindered by lack of concentration and effort during lessons. Theo has an outgoing, at times challenging personality. Theodore finds constructive criticism difficult and a threat, rather than an aid to raise his current level of work higher. Theo must learn to control his dangerous behaviour and listen to staff instructions. He performed well during the basketball module, but as a result of totally ignoring safety rules during the trampolining, which could have potentially caused serious harm to another student, Theo was transferred to an alternative activity. Please call in to see me on open evening so we can work out some strategies to support Theodore in the playground. I look forward to hearing from you. And these are just a couple of many school reports that all don't really paint me in the best light. Whenever you're in school, you usually have that one problem child, and holding my hands up, that was quite often me. And it were never because I wanted to be problematic or the class clown or disrupt other students or anything like that. It's just that I always really struggled to concentrate in any subject that wasn't art class. Art back then, and still to this day in many ways, is the only thing that's ever truly kept me out of trouble. It's the only thing that's helped me harness all the crazy energy that I've got and all the mad ideas in my brain and all those emotions that you have as a human, and helped me channel them into something constructive and positive. And because I've always been this way, I've always had a bunch of drawings and sketches and artwork to show for it. So what I've got here is basically all of my artwork that I saved and that my mum saved, going all the way back to when I first started primary school. Now the reason that I've got all this out is I was looking for one little specific project that I did in college because I want to incorporate it into an up and coming video, and I'm still going to do that. But while I was looking for it, I found out all this other artwork, and I figured that maybe some of the Slimehouse viewers would be interested in seeing it. Now bear in mind, none of this was ever supposed to be seen by anyone. This is all stuff that I did just for myself, like I said, starting off in primary school and then going all the way up to me leaving college. There's lots of early examples here of me doing character creation and storytelling. There's lots of comics here that I spent a long time drawing, lots of fan art, and even some very early examples of me wanting to do toy design as well, which I thought that you lot might find interesting and really ties into what I'm doing today. Now I must also warn you, there's some weird stuff in here. There's some violent stuff, some macabre stuff, there's some stuff that kind of teeters on the edge of being adult. All the kind of stuff that you would expect to see drawn by a little horror-obsessed graffiti artist in his teenage years. But all good fun, and I'd say that I'm looking forward to showing it you, but some of this is quite embarrassing. But if all that sounds like a bit of you, then as always, sit back, make sure you're comfy, and let's do this. So to anybody that doesn't know, if you randomly stumbled across this video and it's your first time here at the channel, I basically create retro style action figures. I 3D sculpt. If I do any drawing, it's always in Procreate on my iPad. I digitally draw. I don't do anything on paper. I primarily work nowadays either digitally or in the world of 3D. But back before any of that was an option, all I had was my pens and my paper. So if I wanted to express myself artistically, drawing was the only way that I could really do it. So I suppose basically what you're going to see in today's video is like a little bit of a Slimehouse history lesson, because there's going to be so many things in these folders and in these drawings that directly correlate to what you see me do now in my new work with the 3D toys and the printing and the action figure design. Like, you're going to see a direct link to the stuff that I used to do when I was a kid growing up. So this first folder is an accumulation of all my work from primary school. And straight away, the first thing that you can see is a piece that's obviously very me. A weird mutated monster. He's got a fin arm, he's got tusk claws, he's got a tentacle coming out of his shoulder, looking like something from Resident Evil 2 basically, but way before Resident Evil 2 even existed, or at least before it was in my peripheral vision and stuff. And I do think that most of the work in here is pretty innocent. I said that as I pull out like an army dude, like a Vietnam veteran guy with a cigar. There's also here, and this is going all the way back to like when I could barely even spell and write, what looks like a very early example of me trying to draw some kind of comic. And what's funny is, something else you'll see that's like a real running theme in my artwork is I love doing lots of teeth, lots of big sharp gnashing teeth, and that's something that you will see in all of my artwork all the way up to this day. Oh, look at this monster. This is really, really early work. It's like some kind of anthropomorphic cow mutant man, obviously. And this, which I think was the Jabberwocky. I think we got read the poem of the Jabberwocky and we had to draw it, and that's how I pictured the Jabberwocky looking. This is when I was 4 years old. 4 years and 7 months. And even back then was always repping for the Ninja Turtles. Check that. So we had to do counting. One monster. Two turtles. 2 Ninja Turtles. And that's me there when I drew my ideal bedroom. Something that was, again, like a continuing theme throughout school and college. You would always have a project where you had to draw your ideal bedroom for some reason. So back then I was really into science and insect studying. I wanted to be an entomologist, so I used to be well into keeping stick insects and scorpions, and I just used to study and draw insects all day, every day. So my ideal bedroom back then had lots of tanks with insects living in it. Oh, this is quite sad. So I remember being in school. I was only 4 years and 5 months, and we had to draw a picture of myself and then my best friend. So I drew a picture of me, and because I didn't have a best friend, or at least I didn't think I did that day, I created my own, and I called her Rachel. And I said, this is my best friend, and she's called Rachel. Yeah, Rachel didn't exist. Or something else really cool I did in primary school as well, before I get to the secondary school stuff, was these comics. Now, you'll see in my artwork and in, like, everything that I did, I was well into comics. I wanted to be a comic illustrator at one point in my life. And I can't remember how many of the drawings I did and what my friend did, because we had similar styles and we were always together and we drew this and coloured it together. But this is Ninja Warriors Part 1. And this is also, like, a little weird example of me first ever doing fan art and wanting to create characters that already existed, but in my own style, and then adding them into my world. Not like Chris Chan. Nothing like Chris Chan, although some of these comics do look like something he would have drawn. It all started after an atomic bomb. Very child-friendly. The explosion caused a radioactive spray in the air. A load of creatures got caught in the spray and mutated. So even back then, I was still always into mutants and things getting caught in toxic slime and sludge and then being turned into crazy anthropomorphic characters. And it's basically a story that's about mutant creatures that split off into 2 different factions, the goodies and the baddies. There's a cool robot there that was made by a scientist dude who died, and then the robot went on to wield a sword, and also, for some reason, teamed up with Gex the Gecko from the old PlayStation game. There's 2 aliens in this story as well, apparently. The 2 aliens took a mutated rat and transformed him into Ratagun, an evil, vicious monster rat with a power suit. Vicious, spelt V-I-S-H-E-R. Back then and still to this day, terrible speller. And apparently in issue 2, we've got some maniac vehicles that are going to turn up. Belt Up, Waves and Flash, which is a police car, some kind of speedboat and a jet plane. And then we've also got Part 3 advertised on the back already. Coming soon, Part 3 of Ninja Warriors versus the Phantom Aliens. Ninja Warriors Part 2. So in this one, I remember that the robot got a girlfriend, and they were supposed to fight each other, but then they fell in love. Issue 4, which we're advertising already before issue 3's even dropped, is introducing some characters called the Dino Crusaders, which I believe might have even come out before the Extreme Dinosaurs did. And they're quite interesting characters as well. We've got like a Triceratops that's purple, and then a Pterodon, a pterodactyl that's dressed like a pilot, like A-Stuck from Ninja Turtles. So that's a figure that even now would make a really cool toy. So yeah, again, some really early examples of me trying to draw comics and create characters and colour in big, bold, colourful colours, and also try and draw comics and tell stories. So now we move on to secondary school stuff. This is when I was a full-fledged teenager, and this is also an era of like WWF or WWE attitude. We were watching South Park, we were listening to Eminem, we was going on Rotten.com, we was watching Tom Green. We were just being exposed to all this crazy media and all this crazy stuff on the internet that we'd never seen before, and it heavily influenced everything that we did moving forward, or at least it did me. Now, I was getting heavily into graffiti at the time. I was going out and taking photos of it every single weekend. I was buying spray cans. I was trying to do it myself. And I think this is my first ever attempt at doing like an actual piece. It says AMP, A-M-P. And I remember drawing this and colouring it in and putting it in this folder and walking around school like that, showing it off to everyone. And everyone were like, whoa, have you drawn that? Whoa. And for like those few days when everybody were clocking this, I was the man. So this is basically my first ever proper comic, me really trying to create characters and tell a story. So this comic is called The Goo Squad, and it was basically me and my friends, and I turned us all into superheroes, and it was all set in Sheffield, and I made pages and pages and pages of it. And it all started because basically, when I was a kid, we used to get this tyre. I feel like I've still got some footage of this. I'll splice it in if I can find it. But we stole this like big plastic tyre from a plastic factory that was miles away from my house. We stole it, we threw it over a fence, we rolled it down a hill, and we rolled it for like 2 miles back to the field where I live. And we used to sit in it and roll down the hill and do jackass stunts. We used to film them on the camera. We used to call it Junior Jackass. And we used to roll down the hill in this tyre. So in the story, I basically said that we were rolling down the hill and we crashed into the bush at the bottom, which we always used to do, and we found some weird toxic barrel full of blue slime, and that blue slime turned us all into superheroes and gave us powers. This is also as well a very early example of me always wanting to put my friends into everything that I was making, whether it was a comic or a movie years later when I made Unit 11 and stuff. I always loved working with my friends. I always loved making my friends look cool. I always wanted to get the best out of all of my friends. So yeah, back then I saw all my friends as superheroes and I wanted to portray that in a comic. So all my friends got different superpowers. We called this guy Mark the Monkey Man because he was really good at climbing trees. My other friend Aaron used to have all like greasy like gel in his hair all the time, so we called him the Gel, and he turned into a slime monster. He could turn himself into slime. There was a few different characters in this comic, but they were all my friends. And as you can see, I drew pages and pages and pages of this thing, like so much. And we end up all getting costumes, and like I said, we get names, and then aliens get involved. There's this alien called, is he called the Summoner or something? What's his name? The Summoner or the Resurrector? But either way, he lands on Earth and he goes to a graveyard and he instantly makes a bunch of zombies. Now, nowadays, I'm totally zombied out. I don't ever want to see another zombie in anything. But back then, I couldn't get enough of zombies. I was so into zombie flesh eaters. I used to watch Dawn of the Dead every day. I was really into Resident Evil at the time, as you know, because I made a whole documentary about my love for that. But I was so into zombies, and I really liked colourful ones that had all mutated in different ways. So I put a load of zombies in this comic. And this is also, as you can see, when I was getting really into violence and viscera in comics, and blood and bodies and heads being destroyed and smashed open in different ways. Again, something that you'll see a lot of in my work as I got a bit older. Also, he's the animator, the guy, not the resurrector, the animator, the dude that brings all the zombies back to life. But again, just pages and pages of destruction, and me and my friends pulling zombies to pieces and pulling their heads off. And me also at the time drawing, but not worrying about it looking good, because it was just for myself and for my friends. Nowadays, when I create anything, I'm such a perfectionist. I'll spend hours and hours and hours on it because I know that it's going to be seen by many people, thousands of people on YouTube. And yeah, back then I didn't have that mentality. I didn't have that mind frame. I was the best drawer in my school, and that's all that mattered to me. So I would just draw these like a few pages a night and colour them and just have fun with it. Something that, yeah, nowadays is just completely lost, because I could just never do that again. So this is when I think it starts turning into more of a graffiti black book, and it's just full of graffiti outlines. And that was my tag, Tesk. To this day, I still write Tesk whenever I'm doing any kind of graffiti. When I did that graffiti train recently, that said Tesk down the side, just because it's always my go-to 4 letters, T-E-S-K, Tesk. So just going back to the front of the comic again before I go any further, this character, the Gecko, is somebody that would go on to feature in all of my artwork throughout secondary school and college and all that. This is a character that even when I forgot about all the others, I still kept drawing him and developing him into new styles and different types of characters. But back then it was basically me as a part human, part gecko character, because I liked lizards. But later on I would really develop this character. This is when I was getting really into horror as well. Check that, Jason versus Leatherface. I was really into Jason versus Leatherface as a concept, and then I found out that they did a comic on it, and yeah, that took me years and years and years to find. You might even remember, because I did an episode about it a few years ago on this channel, where I went through all those comics. And we've got more graffiti here, more colourful stuff. I also got this folder randomly signed by a bunch of like real Sheffield graffiti legends, and the way that it happened is I just left it once in a skate shop in Sheffield because one graffiti artist had an exhibition in there, and I said to the girl there was this cute chick that worked on the desk, and I said to her, would you be able to show my folder to that graffiti artist if he comes in? And then I came back like a day later and it had been signed by a bunch of awesome graffiti artists, like Sheffield legends that I went on to be friends with, but at the time they were like celebrities. celebrities to me, and they tagged all my folder up and they drew pictures and put it inside, and like they sent me like messages of encouragement and stuff saying how much they like my graffiti and things, and it was so cool. One of the coolest things that ever happened to me. And also randomly, that girl, years later, I ended up dating her for like 3 years. Even though at the time she was like 10 years older than me, I met her again when I was 19. She was an actress working in a movie, and we like ran off away together for a couple of years. But that is a story for a different day. A very, very different story. I totally missed this out as well. I did this way before any of that Gecko and that Goose Squad comic. This was a Freddy vs. Jason comic that I created for myself. This is when I watched Jason Goes to Hell, and at the end you see Freddy's glove come out of the ground and grab Jason's mask, originally setting up that concept. And I'll have to actually take it all out of this plastic binder for it to make sense, because I glued it all together. Also, Jason, for some reason, speaks in my comic. I've no idea why. So he comes out of his grave. Jason has returned from the grave, only to stalk again, only to kill again, only to die again. There's also no explanation either for why Freddy and Jason are both in the same part of America. Again, as a kid, you're not really too bothered about plot, are you? You just want to, like, get a cool fight set up. But Freddy runs Jason down. He knows who he is, and they start fighting. And this is terribly drawn. It was probably drawn good for me at my age. Like I said, I was the best drawer in my school. But no one was ever supposed to see this. I literally just did it for me and to show my friends because I thought it would be fun. And they have this fight and they're smashing each other to pieces and chopping each other up. And they're just about to go in for another fight here, because as you can see, Jason's doing a flying kick, something that he obviously does in every single Jason movie. Or at least that's what I thought would be fun for my comic. And then out of nowhere, whoosh, you see a hook on a chain. Flies in, attaches to Freddy's head, and Pinhead turns up. Freddy, get back to hell where you belong. No! Now for you, Jason. And that was going to be continued in Jason vs. Pinhead, a comic that I never did create. And what's funny is back then I was so into horror films and horror characters that were almost presented like anti-heroes, that I wanted to create a comic about them. And if only I knew that years and years later I would be working with so many of these horror legends at HorrorCon. And Doug Bradley, I've now worked with and met many times. I've interviewed him on my channel. I'm friends with his wife. We talk on Instagram and stuff like crazy. If I'd have told my younger self that I would be so wrapped up in the world of horror now all these years later, he would have been absolutely gassed, bless him. So by this point in my life, I'd left secondary school and I'd started going to art college. And when I say art college, it sounds fancy. It's really not. It's just public college that anybody can go to after you've left school. And the thing that I loved about college is that when I was in school, I was the one that was like the main drawer out of all of my friends. Some of my other friends would enjoy drawing and stuff, but they weren't like me. They weren't doing it all day, every day, obsessively. So when I got to college, I basically met a bunch of guys that were like me, that were from the ends, that loved graffiti, that loved comics, that loved hip-hop and stuff. And yeah, I really found my people, and they're friends that went on to be like, honestly, my best friends to this day. I was at one of them's wedding the other day and we all got together. It was awesome. And they're all people that I met at college. And what was also really fun about college is it was kind of like Karate Kid, where I was the best drawer in my school. In my school, in terms of drawing and graffiti, I was the best. Nobody could touch me. Then I went to college and I met kids from all over my city, from all the different ends, that were all at college because they were also the best drawers in their school. So it were like the Old Valley. All of a sudden we all got to college, and just because we were the best in our school, we got there and we was all competing. Friendly competition, but I always thrive in competition. I was seeing people from different schools that I were like, yo, he is bad boy, he's fire, I need to step my game up. And I'm sure people were thinking that about me as well at the time. So we were all collectively all trying to get better constantly. We made a little clique, a little crew, and we just drew all the time, all day. Never did any of the college work that we were supposed to. We all just drew our comics and our anime and our crazy stuff, and all became the best of friends, all thriving under that friendly competition. So you'll quickly see that when I got to college, my graffiti outlines drastically improved. And all of this work is like kind of all over the place. There's just lots of stuff that's all in there. Higgledy-piggledy, as my mum would say. Plague World, that's a movie that I made when I was in college. Something that I really want to do as well, although I've got all my artwork here saved, I also wanted to be a filmmaker all of my life growing up, so I've got so many home movies and like little bits of films that we made growing up and stuff, and then I made 3 feature films before I made Unit 11, so I'd love to do some kind of retrospective video like this, talking about all my old film work and all my old home movies and stuff, and all that kind of thing that led to me now doing Slimehouse full-time here on YouTube. So if that's something that you'd like to see, let me know down in the comments below, because I'd be well up for that. More graffiti. Bright outlines. That's a cool outline. I like that one. These kind of drawings as well are evident of me when I was like 16, 17, and you start getting into like Max Power magazine and that kind of thing, and those comics where they draw the girls like really voluptuously, if that's the right word. Danger Girl and all those kind of comics, all the Todd McFarlane, Angela and all that kind of thing. Everything just gets a little bit more mature from this point on, and as you can see, I'm still drawing my comics, but I've got really into doing like heavy inking. I've got into that like Todd McFarlane style of doing a lot of black on the drawings and kind of started to do less colour. Now remember I was talking about the gecko character that I created earlier. There's lots of examples of the gecko in this artwork as well. When I got to college, he really became my character that I drew a lot of. And I also found out that all of my other friends that I met at college, pretty much all of them, also had their own characters that they'd created and that they drew. And we all ended up putting them in each other's comics and doing crossovers and pictures and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. You can see how we're getting really into like the cross-hatching and all that kind of shading here. Look, again, we've got the gecko here, and you can see that I've kind of turned him into a completely different character at this point. He doesn't have the long tongue anymore and the fingers. He's got like an Adidas tracksuit on with a balaclava and a chain around his neck. So these were a bunch of my friends in college. This was me, the gecko. That was my character. That was my friend Gel, the guy with the jelly hair. I kept that character because I really liked the slime blob creature. This was Jez Phoenix, who still to this day is one of my closest friends and an amazing artist who I like to link up with regularly. I was with him at the wedding thing the other day. And then this was, his surname was Fog, so he become Dr. Fog. And you know those old CP goggle coats that zipped all the way up and have goggles in the eyes? He used to zip up his coat and put his hat on, and it kept all the fog inside, and he could turn his body into fog shapes and things. Dr. Fog, a really cool, fun character, that guy. This was a friend of mine who was Chinese. He's still Chinese. He's still a friend to this day, but he was my friend that I met, and his name was Richard, but his Chinese name was Waizan Meng. So I made a character called Waizan Meng, and he was also really into Soul Calibur. So I did like a cool Chinese dude with a big sword like Soul Calibur and armor, and he would appear in my comics later on. And that's some of my friends in college. Look, that's me with my hair, because I wanted to look like Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy. That's Jez, that's Foggy there, my friends. Good times. We had the best times in college. I felt like I really found myself there. I really found my people. And this character, I'd really like to revisit again. He does appear in some of my comics that I'll show you later, but he's called Jackhammer, and he's like a mutant road worker that has now somehow got a pneumatic drill fused to his arm. Oh, this is how the gecko really started to develop into an actual character. Don't speak, just die. I used to think that was like a really cool saying that the gecko would utter before he shot someone in the eyeball. More gecko here, look, swinging on a chain with a battle axe, don't know why. This looks like James Earl Cash from Manhunt. Yeah, look, he's killing a guy with "Please Stop Me" on his mask, blowing his ear off with a revolver. Again, with the lovely ladies. Got gecko riding on a dragon there. And so many different drawings of gecko. And even though at this time I was concentrating more on comic art and stuff, I'd been hit with the graffiti bug early on, so everything that I did moving forward always had a little bit of a street art and a graffiti look and element and vibe and aesthetic to it. And it's something that still to this day I've never been able to wash my hands of. And I don't want to, because I really love that style. That's my boy Dale, one of my closest friends in the world. Speak to Dale every day. We created a character that was based on him called Vanquish. Again, another one that would make a really cool action figure. Vanquish. So that's all my college work that weren't even in folders. That was just in one big folder. That weren't even presented well. What's this? Fashion. This is my college fashion work. When you do HND art and design and stuff in college, you always have to do a little bit of everything, a bit of fashion, a bit of sewing, a bit of pottery. And this was my fashion folder that for some reason has got the Toxic Avenger on the front. Probably the least fashionable superhero of all time as well, which is quite funny. So we've got some graffiti in there. What is this? Is this just fashion stuff? Bit of graffiti, bit of streetwear, street vibes. Oh, look at that. Chiaki Kuriyama, she was my college crush for sure. I loved her. She was in Battle Royale, Come At Me, Every Ounce of Me Will Resist You. And then when she was older, when I saw her in Kill Bill, boy, I was so blown away by her. I was so obsessed with Chiaki Kuriyama. So there she is. Anyway, what we got here? This is all college stuff. I'm not going to go through every single one of these folders because there's just so much of it, but I'll have like a quick breeze through. Lots of fan art. That's Kunamitsu from Tekken. That's my ex-girlfriend. This chick as well, Saikora, she was a girl character that I created, and she had blue skin and white hair and a white outfit. She come from a different planet. She wore bathing ape though, because she was cool. And look at that, that's like prime Gecko. That's when I really worked out how I wanted him to look. A really good mix of like streetwear and tactical. And he had a gun and a sword that was like kind of like a machete. And yeah, if I made a Gecko toy, that's how I'd want it to look. That was a character called the Wraith that I created for my friend Rob, who was like one of the toughest kids that I ever knew. He was like a really nice, strong Christian guy. He was like the biggest nerd ever, but one day somebody like challenged him to a fight, and he put up the most brutal fight that I'd ever seen in school. Still to this day people talk about it. He fought with like one of the toughest kids, like one of the proper ends guys, and they fought, and it was so brutal. They were smashing each other to pieces, and he was just the last person that you'd ever expect to be able to fight, and we all found out that he was actually a rugby player and a boxer. So I created a character of him called the Wraith that was kind of like a Christian Wraith elemental character. More very brutal, macabre Gecko stuff, him smashing someone's face in with a knuckle duster repeatedly. I used to really like drawing Gecko always covered in splats of blood. Again, look at him there. That's prime Gecko. That's the Gecko I'd really like him to look if I made a toy of him now. The Adidas on, the tactical wear, the elbow pads, the fingerless gloves, the guns. Little Ultraman keyring, always got little trinkets and stuff hanging off his armour. Now this is a comic that I drew in college that featured all of my characters and all my friends' characters in like a big ensemble crossover graphic novel kind of thing, because it's a whole folder. And of course Gecko's in there, Dr. Fogg's there, Jez Phoenix, Saikora, Wraith, Aroda, Gel, all the characters that I've spoke about throughout my different years of drawing in these different eras of my life of doing it, all in this one comic. And this is pages upon pages and pages of me doing a comic with all of my characters in. Look, Waisan Meng is there with his big Soul Calibur sword. Everybody's in this comic, everyone that I drew. And I spent so long on it, and again, barely did any college work ever. I was just fixated on drawing what I wanted to draw. And like you've seen in my other drawings, there's lots of violence, there's lots of blood and gore. There's lots of like mad Zoyanoid looking Guyver monsters getting chopped up and carved up and fighting. There's also some Godzilla style characters in this. I created one called Prince Hydra that was obviously a play on King Ghidorah, and this Ultra Saw that looks a lot like Megalon from Godzilla vs. Megalon, one of my favourite kaiju of all time. And it's got all my friends' characters that they created as well, just like a big mad crossover episode. And it goes on for pretty much a whole folder. We've got Dr. Fogg's origin story here. It's the classic, he's walking home, it's a foggy night, there's a dude drink driving, and he collides with a truck that's got loads of chemicals in the back, and it turns Foggy into Dr. Fogg. This is more solo Gecko comic stuff, where Gecko is just on a rampage, killing loads of people. Like I said, I was just a messed up kid that loved gratuitous violence. Like when he shoots a guy in the face, he shoots him like 50 times. Bam, 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 bam. Throws him out of a window and he explodes on the pavement. Got some graffiti comic stuff that I would draw in here. Obviously, as I've said, I was so into graffiti, so I used to draw graffiti comics as well. Lots of crime stuff, lots of guys in balaclavas with eye patches and scars on their faces. And then lots again of zombie stuff. So this is a comic that I used to draw now and again, an idea called Dead End that was like SWAT team guys versus zombies. And again, lots of blood, lots of shooting and machine gunning, lots of death, lots of heads being exploded. And then I went through a phase when Tokyo Drift come out and we were reading Initial D mangas and watching the Initial D movie and stuff, and we got really into Japanese street racing. So I drew like a Japanese street racing comic where we were all going down the Wangan line and we're drifting and stuff. And what was really funny is every single Friday after college we would go to the arcade in town. We would all go to the arcade every single week without fail, and we all used to play a game called Maximum Tune, which is basically a Japanese street racing game. And I was never never very good at it, but my friends Foggy and Jez and Craig, they were all so good at this game, and Jez was so good that he set the high score. I remember that we went on a trip to London in college, and we saw an arcade, and he walked into this arcade in London, jumped on it, and set the high score in London like that with one race. Anyway, he was so good on this game, and then one time we went to the arcade and somebody had took Jez's high score, and we were all like, yo, who did that? And then we found out it was this guy who came over from Japan that must have been some like foreign exchange student or something, because he didn't really speak English if I remember. But he was called Psy Star, that was his name. Psy, S-I with a star symbol, and he beat Jez's score, so we became like Jez's nemesis, and they were constantly knocking each other off the little top bracket on the game. So in this comic, it's us versus Psy Star's crew. So I wrote Psy Star into this drifting comic that I did. And then I've got more stuff from college. And as you can see, here, this is towards the end of college. Like, I've super improved. If you put this next to the artwork that I was doing like a year and a half, 2 years ago, before this in school, like, it's night and day. Like, look at my drawing there, and then 3 years later, look at my drawing there. Look how much it's improved. All a testament to me being around other people in college that could also draw really good and making me constantly need to step my level up. So here again, we've got the Gecko, we've got Gel, and then another character that I invented that I didn't really ever do much with, but I would like to go back to, called Roll Cage, who was like a dope snail guy. I think I drew him somewhere in here. Oh, there he is. He's like a pink snail with a neon green shell on his back, and he could suck up into the shell and bounce around like a runaway tyre. Jackhammer is also in here, the guy that I was talking about that's a mutant road worker with a pneumatic drill attached to his arm. He's in this comic, and that's like another better drawn concept version of him there. Like, I think he would make a really cool toy. He looks like he's straight out of Ninja Turtles or Toxic Crusaders or something like that. And this other character, Mace, that I used to draw quite a bit, that is like a red-skinned dude that is basically just in an armor suit that's a giant mace. Spiked fist, spiked head, spiked everything. And then here is a load of concept art that I did for my movie Plague World that I was talking about earlier. I made Plague World before Unit 11 in college, and basically what I did is I just blagged it, and the movie that I made, Plague World, I made out to my college tutors and stuff that I'd been filming that as part of my course, and I literally just did it for my college course. So that could be my final end of year piece, but it was a movie that I was making anyway. So I just did some concept art and some posters and some drawings of different characters, like that's me and my friends that's in that movie. And then this is when I was getting really into doing fan art, like in those deviant art days. So we've got the street sharks here, we've also got the extreme dinosaurs. I spoke about this recently in a video, but I was always so into drawing characters that already existing IPs, but in my own style, and how would they look if I drew them and they existed in my world and in my comic. So this is basically a lot of that. We've got the biker mice from Mars here, Vinny, Throttle and Modo. Got all the Toxic Crusaders there. Always loved the Toxic Crusaders, always, always. Lots of Generation 1 Transformers artwork. I was so into G1 growing up. I know every single word to the first 3 or 4 episodes, is it, of More Than Meets the Eye. Every single word. I used to watch that religiously, and Ironhide was always my guy. And then we've got a really nice one here of Psychora and the Gecko. I say really nice, all this drawing to me is super embarrassing. I drew all this stuff when I was like 17 years old in college, so obviously I've improved a lot since then, so this is kind of embarrassing looking back. But it's nice to look back, it's nice to see how far I've progressed and how far I've come, and how again, I used to have so much fun just drawing things without any inhibitions or any worries about anybody really seeing it other than my college friends. And bear in mind, I never used to copy anything. Still to this day, I don't copy anything. I've never been good at looking at something and then doing a direct copy. I've never felt good about doing it. I've never been good at doing it. So I've looked at things for reference, like if I needed someone's armor to look like something from a cartoon or whatever, like I was doing a fan art, I would look at the armor of how the ridges are and the spikes and how it folds and things, and I would use it as a reference, but I would never directly copy anything. One, like I said, because I never felt good doing it. I always wanted to be able to draw it myself. And two, I was just never good at copying anything ever. I'm just no good at copying things. So that's most of my college stuff, and like I said, I had the best time in college. I really met my people, I really had the best time. If I ever think back to like some of the happiest times in my life, it's definitely college, when I met all those friends and we were just together every single day. In school, I hated it. I hated going to school. Like every day I would wake up and think of an excuse not to want to go to school. But college, I can't remember a single time that I ever got up and thought, oh, I can't be bothered with college today. I always really loved going. I always loved seeing my friends, and I always loved going and just being able to sit and draw and hang out with people that were all on the same level as me, all had the same mentality as me, was into the same things as me, and we could all just draw and have the best time together. Leaving college was like a real sad thing for me. I never wanted to leave college. I wanted to stay at college forever. Now, after college came having to basically become an adult and join the real world and become a normal person for a bit. And although I did do some jobs where I darted around doing like freelance graphic design and illustration and drawing and things, eventually when I wanted to get a mortgage and buy a house and things, I just had to get a normal job. And I ended up working in a chain of different call centres. And I did inbound sales and outbound sales and all stuff that I hated. Eventually, the last one that I worked in was a delivery centre for curries, like delivering fridges and computers and laptops and that kind of thing, and dealing with people's complaints where the deliveries either weren't on time or something would arrive and it wouldn't work. Anyway, it was not a great time. I met really awesome people there. I met some of my favourite people that I ever met working in those call centres. I found that you was working in an environment where nobody was trying to front that there was anything special. They were all just like super real people, and I genuinely made some really great connections and relationships and friendships in those call centers. But basically, although you weren't allowed to actually have a pen and a paper, I would always kind of get away with having one because my manager would see that I was drawing something cool. And it got to a point where I would just sit there drawing all the time. So I would be on the headset trying to speak to customers who were talking to me like a dickhead. And the only thing that kept me sane, other than the cool people that I was working with, was the fact that, yeah, basically I could just sit and draw all day. So this folder is basically all the stuff that I drew while I was working in call centers. And I basically really changed my mind frame as well, because before this I was drawing, like I said, lots of things in one day. I was just blasting stuff out. Nobody was ever meant to see it. But when I was working in the call center, I could only have like 1-2 pieces of paper, and I had all the time in the world because I was sat on a headset for 8 hours a day. So I started to train my brain to spend a lot longer on each individual picture. So rather than draw 2-3 things in a day, I would spend a week, 2 weeks on one drawing. So if I had 8 hours, I would basically say, okay, I'm going to draw a gun in this character's hand, and I'm going to spend 8 hours getting the perspective perfect. I'm going to spend 8 hours just on the hand. I'm going to spend tomorrow 8 hours just on the helicopter that's in the sky behind his head. And I really started to train myself to slow down and dial everything in and really concentrate on what I was drawing. And as you'll see from my college artwork to this, I came on leaps and bounds. So here we've got years and years later from school, I'm still drawing Leatherface. I'm drawing a Leatherface versus Chucky drawing. And as you can see, the chainsaw, each tooth on it is like pretty much perfectly spaced. I'm spending ages drawing the chain that's hanging from the roof. Every single part of it, although it's still not amazingly drawn, you can still see that I've spent a lot longer on each individual element of the drawing. I used to draw these things a lot as well. My friend Flex called them globs, so that's what I ended up calling them after. But they're like flying meatballs with teeth, and I've got storylines for them. Again, something that I would love to make toys of in the future. A lot of this isn't in colour either, because I could only have a pencil and one piece of paper, so it was all just sketched. Like this is Colossus and Nightcrawler from X-Men, but if you look at like his hands and his belt, you can see I've spent a long time just on those elements, again because I had like days and days to work on one picture. I was never happy with these faces. It took me a long time to develop a way of drawing faces that felt unique to me and that I liked. I spent a long time darting around different styles until I kind of got one that I was happy with. And still to this day, I still play around with faces and have days when I'm not like super happy with how they look. Let me get to some good stuff. That's Ice Pick, who's in Unit 11. R.I.P. Jimmy Carroll, he's no longer with us, but that actor that played Ice Pick in the movie, I drew like a cool comic cover for him. Okay, so here's a good example of me getting much better at drawing Gen 1 Transformers. So here we've got Huffer and Brawn, and as you can see on the hands, like I've spent a long time drawing the Transformers mechanical parts on the knuckles and everything, and the ridges. Got one here of Wheeljack and Ratchet, two of my favourite Gen 1 Transformers again. I love all the OG lineup, they're my favourite Transformers of all time. Like after the movie and stuff, I was never that bothered. And you can see this hand, I've spent ages rubbing it out and drawing it again and rubbing it out and drawing it again because I just wanted to get it perfect. This was a really cool concept I come up with, like a crossover episode. Jack and Jarrell, so Jarrell from The Golden Child and Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little Chinatown, like a comic where they both teamed up because I always thought both those films had real similar vibes and aesthetics. Here we've got Cobra Commander with a tank exploding behind him, and again you can just see how much time I've spent on the wheels and the tyre tracks and the explosion and the power lines and the gun in his hand and his armour and his chain. Again, yeah, just spending so long on each individual part of this thing just because I had all the time in the world to do it. This was a cool character. He was some kind of robot, a bit like Mutagen Man, but he had a tank on his head with all these different eyeballs in, and each one was a different serial killer or murderer or criminal that was all like locked up for doing different things, so he had lots of different skills. So he again would be a really cool character to revisit, this dude with loads of different criminal eyeballs inside his head. Some more nice graffiti outlines there. And again, like, seriously improving on what my stuff looked like in college. I feel like between college and working at the call centres, like, I stepped up so much. Some kind of gratuitous stuff here. There's a weird alien girl with a guy and his hands on the back of her head doing something which you can probably imagine. I had this whole like concept of trading cards that I were going to do called Mutant Space Hookers, about these intergalactic working girls and all the weird stuff that they came across and all the people that would like fly by and stop off from different galaxies and the different things they would experience, but I just never did anything with it. This was a really cool concept for an 80s horror movie that I came up with called Quarterback, about a serial killing NFL player or like a college high school football player. You can see here we've got Gecko again, and he's shooting someone's face off, and this dude took me ages to draw. As you can hopefully see, he's got 4 different arms, so he's got 2 sets of arms, he's holding a toxic barrel, he's getting his brains and his face and everything, his teeth and everything, his eyeball blown out the side of his head by Gecko with some kind of Glock. We've got the shell casting there bouncing out of the gun. Gecko's got a lollipop in his mouth. This guy's dropping bullets from his magazine that he were going to put into his Mac-10 before he got executed. And so many little intricate details again all over him, chains wrapped around his arm, plasters, tattoos, and buttons and zips, and just all little things that I love adding to give a picture some story. There's a cool Venom here. I never liked how I drew the face on this Eddie Brock. Like I said, I was still developing my faces, but all the stretched symbiote and the slime and the goo and the saliva and the teeth and everything, I still quite like that. I think that really works. A really cool header art. I still like this. Wouldn't change anything on there, really. Still like that Hedera to this day. But I do think Hedera is one of those characters that you can't really mess up. You can't really go wrong with Hedera. I would like to do an episode creating a Hedera, just because I never have, and I feel like it would be a really quick thing to sculpt. Maybe I would use this as my concept, as my idea for it, because, yeah, who doesn't love Hedera? We've got another glob here. Look at this guy, like a Vietnam veteran glob. I did draw him a couple of times. There will be another picture of him somewhere in one of these folders. Got a Bucky O'Hare picture here that I spent ages on and then I messed up when I put the ink on it. Some cool looking, alluring, enchantress looking woman there, look. Some cool sorcerer warrior. Oh, there we go. There's my Vietnam glob. Again, a character that I would really like to revisit. I think this guy looks awesome. And I had a whole story about him being summoned back in like the medieval times by an evil sorcerer, and then he got trapped in ice and then woke up years and years later during the Vietnam War, and ended up joining a platoon because he took out an outpost full of Viet Cong, so they swore him into the squad and he became one of them. And this here is a picture that I spent ages on. Again, I don't like the face on the character, but I drew my own version of Leon from Resident Evil 2, and he's shooting one of the spiders from Resident Evil 1, blowing its back off. All the little spiders, the little baby spiders, are falling out of its back. He's got some weird tentacle thing grabbing onto his leg in the water with eyeballs. There's an umbrella zombie here with an arrow stuck in its back, crawling out of this little porthole. Spent ages on the bricks and the direction that they were laid, and yeah, just a long time spent on one drawing, again, just because I could. Lots and lots of fun drawing this stuff in a real like rubbish environment and a really demanding environment where if you came off the headset for more than 2 minutes they would buzz through and ask what you were doing and you was using up too much time, and yeah, it was just like being in like a prison, man. It was like the prison from Ready Player One where the IOI work. But I feel like it was a really good example of taking a negative and making a positive out of it. No matter what job I've done in my life, I've always tried to find a positive out of it. Obviously, everything's positive about what I do now with Slimehouse, but when I used to have to work manual labour, or I used to have to work in offices and call centres and things, I would always try and take some kind of positive out of it. Something that I could take away that benefited my career, that was completely separate to the work environment I was in. And in the case of a call centre, it was drawing and spending a long time on drawings. Like these here, more Gen 1 Transformers. We've got Starscream and my guy Ironhide.
I'm leaking lubricant.
Now, after a couple of years, I ended up leaving the call centre and I vowed to never go back to working in an office ever again. So I did a few different jobs. I worked in a college, I did some manual labour, I worked with my dad, I did lots of things. But eventually I built up enough of a client base to be able to do commission work pretty much full time. So I did commission work. I also worked at my friend's tattoo studio doing custom designs for tattooing and things. And this was all around the same time as well that I was making my movie, Unit 11. So drawing for myself between doing commissions and making my movie and working at the shop, and then also running the Slimehouse Cinema, which is how this whole thing actually started. I just didn't really have time to sit and draw things for myself anymore. So I did the odd thing, and there's a few little bits in here that I drew for myself, and you can see that I was coming on leaps and bounds now with how I was progressing with my drawing skills. But a lot of this was down to doing commissions for other people. It weren't really because I was drawing stuff for myself anymore. My days of drawing things for myself at this point really took a back seat. And although I was still drawing gecko and I was still drawing comic style things, it was like very few and far between. And this one's pretty funny because I didn't actually realise this until I started looking back at this old artwork. But here I've got a Vietnam looking guy with some khaki green military uniform on and orange skies and a tank and stuff. And I thought, where have I seen that before? And then I went back to this folder of the very first stuff that I ever drew as a kid when I could barely hold a pen. And look! You put them two side by side, and it's very much the same image, just drawn like 25 years apart. And I suppose that's just a really good example, as well as all of this work that I've showed you today, that I've never really changed up who I am and what my tastes are and what I'm interested in. There's another gecko here, a character that at this point I'd been again drawing for like 15 years. I'm still drawing tons of teeth. There's one here that I never even finished, like an arcade cabinet that's got lots of teeth and tentacles and looks like it's been mutated or infected with a demon. There's another Transformer here. I was still drawing Transformers, very much like when I was a little kid drawing that comic with my friend. There's some Ninja Turtles and Casey Jones here from around the same time. I was drawing Ninja Turtles when I was like 3 years old in school when we were learning counting. So basically, whatever I was into when I was 2, I was still into when I was 32, and will probably still be into when I'm 92 if I live that long. But what I've got here in this little folder, the Vietnam guy and stuff, and the arcade cabinet and the gecko fighting a tentacle octopus creature, is basically some of the last stuff that I actually drew on paper, because from here I primarily moved everything digital. And if you've watched Slimehouse for any number of years, you know the story now. I was a professional illustrator doing commissions and jobs, album covers, posters, comic cover illustrations, lots of toy design. There is something though, contrary to what I just said about not losing a connection to who you was as a little kid, that I do really feel like I've lost by turning everything digital and now always working on an iPad. So if I draw anything now, it's always digital. That's how a client wants it. They want it digital. They want it as a digital file. People don't want paper anymore. But looking at this stuff, from the stuff that I did when I first started drawing all the way up to the stuff that I've been doing in the last 5 years or something, it's really, really made me want to get some paper and some pens and just draw something. Now there is just one more thing that I wanted to show you before I wrap this video up. I've had to pull my camera out a little bit on a wide angle because this isn't no A4 piece of work. This is big stuff. So here is a bunch of A2 stuff that I had to do in school and college. Like there's a gecko there that I had to do as one of my final pieces when I was in art class in school. I'm like 13 or something when I've drawn this. I'm like 13 years old. This is so old now. More graffiti stuff. Okay, here we are. So when you're in college, when you're in school, like I said earlier, you always have a project where you have to draw your ideal bedroom. You have to draw basically what your ideal bedroom would be. I don't know why, but it's always a project that I ended up having to do in college and in school and in everything. So what I've got here is my drawing of basically my dream bedroom, my dream room to work from. And if you look, it's got grey painted walls with a big piece of graffiti painted across it. There's toys here displayed. There's spotlights in the ceiling. There's lino on the floor because I wanted to be able to do projects in there and not ruin the carpet. There's a workbench with tools. It looks a lot like a room that I now know very well as an adult. All these years later, now at the age of 37, it looks very much like a room that's very familiar to me. And this is not something that we're conscious or anything like that, but this is basically Slimehouse Studio. I was dreaming about having Slimehouse Studio when I was in college. And all these years later, now, like, I get to live in it and work in it and create movies in here every single week. And I didn't even think of that when I was putting this room together. I didn't think about a piece of artwork that I drew in college to design my ideal bedroom that I did when I was like 16 years old. Of course I didn't. It's basically just another example of me never switching up and always wanting the same thing and always been into the exact same style and the exact same aesthetic. And I don't know what that says about me, but I think it's pretty cool. And then I also found this in the college artwork as well, which is, again, just another huge connection to everything that I do now. And something that brings everything full circle, or at least I plan to bring it full circle in an upcoming video. And what I've got here is my work from college, where I'm basically designing the packaging for a gecko action figure. Now, not only did I have to do a bit of research and create like a $6 million man box, bear in mind this is probably some of the most concentrating that I ever did in college ever, because it was all about just designing a toy box. But not only did I design the toy box, I also designed a little figure of the gecko as well. So this was just a little mini money that you buy blank and then paint, but I used this as part of my college artwork just so I had some kind of representation of a gecko figure. And I just feel like that's a stupid little mini money figure. If Theo then had the skills that Theo has now, you don't know that he would have created an action figure of the gecko. So yeah, I really feel like that's something that I want to do in an upcoming episode. What do you reckon? Do you think that the gecko finally deserves the full action figure treatment after all these years? I reckon that he does. So that's a ton of my artwork that I've just shared with you since I was a little kid all the way now to me being an adult. And like I said, a lot of it's embarrassing. A lot of it is really not good. I see the faces and the hands and the way that I would draw in anatomy and stuff, and it just makes me cringe. But obviously it's all learning. And I suppose if anything, it's nice for people to see this stuff that are drawing now or just starting out or at that midway point where they're trying to get better. And it just shows that like everybody starts somewhere. You see me sculpt things now on my channel and I try and make them look as professional as possible, but that's because I spent years and years failing and drawing stuff that wasn't very good and trying to get better. So yeah, hopefully if 1 or 2 people can see this video and they watch it all the way to the end, because no doubt this is going to be a long one, hopefully they can take a little something away from it and maybe it inspires them to create something cool as well, or stick with it if you're doing something and you feel like it's not very good. It will get better, just stick with it, never lose that connection. If you enjoyed this video today, then please don't forget to give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and binge the back catalogue. Go and see some of my new videos. You've seen all the artwork I did as a kid. Go and see what that stuff progressed into all these years later. I'd also love to put out a bit of a challenge like this to other artists and YouTube creators to maybe create a video showing some of your early work, even if it's just an Instagram post or a reel or something like that. I'd love to see what you were working on before you did what you're doing now. Speaking of artwork as well, I've started releasing t-shirts here on YouTube under the Fourth Wall store, and they've been really popular, and if they stay as popular as they have been, then I'm going to keep doing exclusive designs, so make sure you keep a lookout for them because they're going to be awesome, and I'm having a lot of fun finally putting out some merchandise and some t-shirts after such a long time of people asking me to do it. If you want to help support videos like this, then I do have a Patreon. If you watched the recent video that I did where I was talking about YouTube earnings, you'll know that revenue is so down at the minute. So the only way that I can keep doing videos like this is by having a Patreon. That's patreon.com/SlimeHouseTV. I'll put the link down in the description. But even if you just support this video by giving it a like, I really do appreciate you being here. With all the other stuff that you could be watching on YouTube, it really does mean a lot that you come back here every single week and watch what I'm doing here. And like I said, the only reason that I got all of this stuff out is because I was looking for a piece of artwork that's to go into my next video that'll be dropping very soon as well, which I can't wait to show you because it's going to be an absolute banger. But until then, I'm Theo Kane, this is Slimehouse TV, and I'm gone. Pow.